This is the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, the biggest, most fun podcast in the galaxy. We're Adina, Brian, Cris, and Steve, and we love talking all things science fiction. This is Season 4, but our human adventure is just beginning as we gather around our computer consoles to discuss the science fiction of film, television, and literature. Join us on our quest for fun and fascination as we go where no podcast has gone before. Everyone has permission to come aboard the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, but make sure to find your seat fast because we're taking off in 3, 2, 1, hit it. This podcast is a part of the Trek Geeks Network.
Listeners of the Big Sci-Fi Podcast, we come to you today with a special episode with an important message. Now, normally, we record our episodes weeks in advance, but we're talking to our guests just before releasing this episode because of the timeliness of an upcoming event next Friday, September 8th, 2023. This event, named United We Trek, is designed to help support the countless creatives behind Star Trek, help them remind Paramount executives that Gene Roddenberry's vision of a future was one where everyone is treated with respect. And in the present day, professionals of all sorts deserve the ability to earn a living from their hard work. My Big Sci-Fi co-hosts, Brian, Cris, Steve, and I, are joined by three incredible SAG actors, two of whom you might be familiar with from their work on a certain franchise. Now, a franchise, I might add, that is successful because of the work of thousands of creatives, actors, writers, designers, you name it. The first is the relentless and passionate John Billingsley, who we've interviewed before, and two newcomers to our podcast, Natalia Castellanos, hope I got that right, and Jonathan Del Arco. As I mentioned, all three are SAG-AFTRA members, and Natalia is even on the SAG-AFTRA negotiating committee. Now, I'll let them spill the beans more on what United We Trek is all about and how you, our listeners, can help. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you want to jump in and get us started with how this came about and what it is we're up to?
A little backstory on it. In May, when the writers went on strike, I went to support. I was walking the picket line outside Paramount, and someone who was a fan of the franchise said, "Hey, you're so and so. Thanks for coming." And they said, "We're doing a special picket on said franchise. Will you come?" And I said, "I'll not only come, I'll email all my friends." And one of the first people I emailed was John, because I know he's got the list of everybody that are on the franchise, I think. So John and I emailed folks. They had a massive turnout. It was fantastic. Cut to, I would say, a few weeks ago, John and I were outside Paramount. And we were just chatting as we walk. That's what we do. We chat with each other. It's a great visit time with our friends on the picket lines. And I think John said, "I think it's time to do one for us, and I said, "Let's do it." And Natalia was doing a picket for a Latinos event. I mentioned it to her, even though she is new on the starship. She someday, I'm sure, joined us, and of course, she's got all the very important connections at SAG and information on how the strike has been going. So that's what we created. It really has become very fan-centric, and that's very exciting to us as actors. As you know, we've talked about how big the fans are a part of the franchise. They saved the franchise. In 1966, they continued to save the franchise every day by watching us and supporting us at cons and writing us and being the best fans in the world. So why would we not invite them to come to the gates and let the powers that be know how?
And just to be clear, what this is a 2-hour moving picket from 10 to noon on the West Coast. There is now 9:30 to 12 o'clock picket on the East Coast as well.
Oh, okay.
Very
That's
good.
new.
Just got added. WGA contacted us and people with the WGA and said, "Hey, how come you're not doing it in New York?" We said SAG is actually not picketing that day. They said, "We are. Can we do it?" So we are going to have a New York walk as well.
Wonderful.
It's a picket, and I think it's really important to make that clear. So we to avoid having to get a permit, We don't have a podium. We don't have mics. We don't have a presentation. It is classic picket. We'll have signs. We'll have water. Bring sunscreen. Bring a hat if you're coming. And we'd love to have everybody show up who wants to. Just be aware that maybe taking Uber, Lyft, public transportation would be wise. Parking will be at a premium. As much time as you want to spend between 10 and noon. It's not a convention-centric event, i.e., there won't be autographs. It's not really about the interactions with the celebrities so much as all of us as an ecosystem. Fans, celebrities, designers, directors, writers, everybody coming together to say, is us. It's not owned, it's us. Mm-hmm. And that's the point.
That's lovely.
I'll add that the importance of doing it on what we now, because we can't use the name of the show, we now refer to as either as blank blank day or as Very Appreciation Day. We all know what it is. So on blank blank day, I prefer saying that. Blank blank day doesn't belong to Paramount. It belongs to the fans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's remember that. And this year their own events are truncated because we are not available to work for free, which we do every year on blank blank day. The real event's going to be happening outside those gates, and that's going to be the fans and the actors and the writers and the craftspeople and the people from crews that have worked on your favorite show are all going to be there, and it's going to be really fun. I actually find the pickets really fun to begin with, but the special ones really they really create a sense of family. So
nice.
One of the things that's really important to all of us is to say we ain't going away. We're in this for the long haul. So if you have any illusions that you're going to break our will or break our spirit, we're fighting for the next generation of performers, and we are prepared to stay out as long as it takes for us to get a fair deal that allows this community of actors, 160,000 strong, to survive and flourish. Yeah. So it's important to have a passionate, vocal crowd coming out to the lines every day. And this is our brick in the wall. I'd love to. Natalia is so well versed in all of this as somebody who's been on the negotiations committee. I wanted to tell you, would you talk about from your perspective what the issues are and why we're fighting this fight?
Yeah, 100%. I think, it's really important for first and foremost, for everybody to understand that our fight, obviously, as visible as it is because we have faces that everybody recognizes. But this fight is around the country. This is a hot labor summer for a reason. We see UPS workers and Starbucks workers and pilots, possibly. Everybody is kind of rallying based on that. Our key issues, which is also an issue for everybody, is one of them is minimum wages. We're asking for a raise in minimum wages, including inflation, right? Right now, what they're trying to offer us is less money in actual real dollars in 2023 than we would have made that we made in 2020. Like, let's just let that sit for a second.
Right.
We can barely afford just our housing, our food. So minimum wages is a huge ask, right? The other thing that we are talking about are protections with AI. AI is a huge thing. And we've seen AI take over places like your supermarket. You go now to the supermarket and there's a automated checkout system. That is somebody's job was replaced by this computer system. And for the artists, your face, your likeness, all of that, your voice, all of that is what we're asking for guidelines and how we can get our members compensated, and also for them to have consent as far as what these companies want to use our voice and likeness and face, right? Because they're trying to use it in perpetuity in all their franchises without our consent and without payment. And as actors go, in case, some people don't understand how actors work, most of our workforce works for free until we get paid. And so we're having a ton of auditions. We're working hard every single day. We get a job. Yay, we book something. You might get paid then, but we also then might not work for a few months, a few years. And we also have to pay, obviously, taxes and our representation, they get commissions on that. So that money that you think that sounds really large actually is really, really small at the end of the day, and for us to survive. Other things that we're trying to get protection on is just trying to get a piece of the pie. Revenue sharing. The industry has completely changed. They have created this thing called streaming. And with streaming, the way we actors are able to survive from job to job is getting what we call residuals. So every time our face and likeness and shows get on the air, those companies are paying us a piece with residuals so that we can survive for the next job. But because everything has moved to streaming, we're actually not making money. So on a show, for example, because it's been out in the news, Suits is making a ton of, having a ton of view out there. But those actors that are on that show are not making money because it's on the streaming platform, right? And so what we're asking for are to be able to get a revenue share, right? Not from the net profit, from the gross profit, so that it's based on what you're making. We should be a part of that because we're the ones that are in the shows and creating this content to make these multi-billion-dollar companies a ton of money.
The number that is really staggering, which is that 80-ish% of our union doesn't make enough money, $26,000 approximately a year, to qualify for health benefits.
Wow.
And that's because for the most part, that percentage of our population is counting on residual income. They may only have one job that year, one actually new job. It's the residual income that gets them up to the threshold where they can get health care. We are not seeing 80+% of our union get to that place. And this is in Los Angeles, the most expensive city in America.
Yeah.
So it is an existential crisis for our workers.
And I think putting together the 86% is with 160,000 members. Let's just let that number sink in, are not qualifying for health insurance. That's a real problem.
And even that doesn't really represent it fully, because if you looked at the people that people think stars, Tom Cruise, yada, 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 it's actually like a 1% of the membership that is, truly like, So people kind of have a very strong misperception of how the economics in our industry and in our work. It's a great mass of not even middle class, but really lower middle class people who are fighting for the survival of their families and their livelihoods.
Can I pile on this with one other point, which I think people that don't know actors don't really understand. What the hell do you do all day? Well, most of us have day jobs. So a lot of us are waiters or drive Uber, we do whatever we can to schedule around our lives. But what people don't really get, as John was saying, we may have one job a year. We work almost every day in preparation for auditions. We have to learn sometimes 10 pages of material overnight or over 2 days to try to get the job. So what I would tell someone who's got basically a job that they go to every day, 9 to 5, imagine having to have at least 3 job interviews a week. That is the tantamount to that. And for every job interview, you had to learn a whole new skill. You had to learn how to do an accent. You had to learn all the stuff, and you didn't get it. That is what we do. We do it because we love it. This is not about complaining. It's just that is the reality of the business we're in. And it's important for people to really understand that we're not all millionaires or even thousandaires, if that's a word. We are, the majority of us are struggling paycheck to paycheck. And this strike has been very, very difficult, particularly for people with families and houses and rent to pay. It's been really devastating. And the very wealthy, executives don't seem to really care. They're not, it's not moving them.
And one of the things we want to do by bringing fans more vocally and fully into the orbit of this effort is to say to people who already, witness the fact that you guys put so much of your lives into doing this work. You love the work. You love art. You love what you get. This ecosystem is being threatened. What happens if we don't fight this fight together is that there will be less. There will be less and less and less because you simply won't have the artists sticking around to make it anymore because they can't survive. So there is, if you love this, there is an existential challenge to everybody, including the audience. And I think one of the things that we really want to try and say with this effort is to the audience who loves it, not just this franchise, but who likes entertainment and wants it to continue, join us in the effort. And how do you?
I really appreciate the voice you guys are giving to the everyday struggle, because I know people that, as I've talked about this in relation to what we're trying to do as a podcast, like, oh, they're making tons of money. Don't let them fool you. You know, all that stuff. They should get real jobs. And I'm saying, well, they probably have more real jobs than you do, actually, as they're grinding it out each day. So I appreciate that voice that you're giving to that, so that people can hear.
And the flip
you're working
of that
your butts off.
If it's not that, if you don't feel it's that important, don't watch television.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I heard, I was listening to an interview that Michelle Hurd did on another podcast about a month ago, and she pointed out, and I've been repeating this, and now I've been seeing other people repeat this, is when the pandemic happened, what did we all do?
That's right.
We all turned on the TV and for comfort, for real, you know.
Right.
And if that didn't show us the value that we're getting out of entertainment and how important it is to us, nothing ever will. You know, this is what we all did. We all turned on the TV. We all turned on our streamer services. We all watched a lot of our favorite franchises and everything. And yeah, so this is our, I think, again, I see, you know, what we're trying to do here is help, you know, give something back and help you guys survive, because we need you.
And I think it goes back even before COVID, right? Like we look at how important art has been a huge part whenever we're going through something. Where do we turn to? We turn to the artists, because that's how we are seen. That's how we feel seen and heard. And so we have to remember that that's the humanity that we're trying to keep alive versus it being connecting with an AI.
Yeah.
And to that earlier point about this is an existential struggle that I think is a function of the politics of the day. We've seen the journalism industry take it nuts. We've seen the music industry take it into nuts. At some point, some faction needs to stand up and say, the corporate class that creates structures and models that are designed to service themselves, but dismiss the need of servicing the artists, you need to say stop, you know. And I do think that this is why it's important that we all together, including fans, viewers, and audience, find a way to communicate, megaphone out to the people who hold the purse strings that we're not cracking.
And Natalia, I mean, it is the actors, it's the writers, but right now there's no production happening. So people forget that crafts, the people who build the sets are friends like Doug Drexler and Mike and Denise Okuda, who make or help design. They're not getting any work either because nothing is happening. So it's affecting more than just one people. You know, as long as the producers want to, you know, feel like, oh, we're going to outlive you guys. No, because at certain point they're going to have no new product. It's pointless for them to continue on without just doing something. When my daughter was 6 years old, said to me, she says, "Daddy, see, we're working together. That's cooperation." And come on, I mean, a 3-year-old can understand it. You think that adult corporate executives would understand that? Hey, you know, we can get together and cooperate with the actors and the writers to make everybody happy.
100%, Steve. And I think this is it's affecting our economy in such a larger scale, because the amount of production that is brought to any city that we talk about, right? Whether it be Atlanta or New York or Pennsylvania or Texas or LA, wherever we are, it is going to up everybody. Hotels, dry cleaning, car rental places, restaurants, any of that, it's going to, and what the biggest problem is that we're seeing that these companies, the AMPTP and their CEOs that are the ones kind of not wanting to come back to the table is the greed and not looking at it perspective-wise of what is happening in our entire country. But because they're the type of people that want to go up in space and look down for perspective.
Yes.
Come to the picket line with us, united, we trek and see the perspective of what everybody is dealing with. I think that is where hopefully they will start seeing the light. But right now they have not wanted to come back to the table, unfortunately, with us. They are talking to the writers, but we've been ready as a negotiating committee for SAG-AFTRA to get back to the table to get a righteous deal.
So can you explain a little bit about more what that means and where the standstill is, if that's the right word?
So, for sure. So just a quick little thing on the negotiation history is like when you negotiate with these companies, we're literally in front of across the table from lawyers. They're not actually the creatives, by the way. They're the lawyers for these big corporations. They sit in front of the table, which, by the way, they don't understand what we do, really, because they've never done it. They're bean counters. Not anything wrong with that, but they're right. Like that's what they understand. They don't understand our world. So we sit down and the standstill is that they're wanting us to give a lot more and we're not ready to do that. And we don't want to do that because there's things in our contract that have not changed, ready for this number, in 40 years.
Wow.
Whoa.
We are working on a contract that is certain provisions are 40 years old that never really dealt with streaming, for example.
Think about how you watched television 40 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
It was still just a couple of channels, maybe cable.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a way, the ecosystem world, the word becomes important to me because I think what happened and what has happened generally across our country is that people who own stuff change structures without asking labor to participate in the changes. This structure that was changed without our participation, this streaming structure, did away with advertising and basically said the revenue is going to come from the subscription model. That's changing two really critical elements without having any conversation with us about, well, what repercussions for us? They want us to, in essence, accept a smaller slice of a pie they shrunk.
So let me ask a question about that, because this has been something that's been bugging me since the beginning. And I think I understood it at the beginning, but as things continue, I'm understanding it less and less. Why not call for a boycott against the streaming services?
So I can tell you, everything in negotiations is done strategically, right? So strategy is something that we always take into consideration. That doesn't mean that may not be part of our strategy in the near future.
Eventually. Okay.
Exactly. It's just not the strategy right now today.
Right.
One of the things that we are having, which is a part of the strategy, is you've probably heard they are interim agreement projects. So there are some independent producers or some projects out there that have interim agreements that are allowed to work, continue to work, based on all our terms. We're not waiving anything. So just to be clear, I know in the press it says a waiver. It's not a waiver. We're not waiving anything. They're agreeing to our last terms with the industry on July 12th. That is what their contract is that they're signing. So that's part of the strategy, because if any AMPTP company buys any of these interim agreement projects, guess what they are now signing towards? Right. Our revenue share, our AI protections, all of the benefits, our percentage of increases in minimums, all our benefits that we're asking for us. And so that is part of the strategy.
I'd also say that to a certain extent, I don't want to make Netflix lose audience. I don't want to make them suffer. I want them to wake up and recognize I'm part of it too, So to a certain extent, I know that there is a baked-in sense that it has to be an antagonistic relationship, and obviously the rhetoric is very heated, and there's a lot of upset. But my desire is not to break a model that's already battered. It's to actually ask the people to attend to the model and help us fix it collectively. So I don't want to damage the car particularly. Yeah. That's my opinion.
No, and I think it's a great opinion, right? I think that's what John is saying is part of it. Like,
I also think we want to be on the side of the audience. I don't want the audience to pay a price. I want the audience to help us speak up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that one, candidly, it would be the most effective thing to ask a huge audience to stop watching the shows they love. I would rather say, could you lean in as you watch over the months, the content begin to dry up a little bit? Could you lean in to saying, hello, hello? That's what I think we're trying to achieve.
100%.
I'm not on the negotiating committee. That's just my 2 cents.
But I think you're completely right, John. Like, that's right. That's why that's not in the strategy right now.
Yeah. And that's really helpful for the fans, I think, to hear as well, is that it's one thing. It's like anything really in our country is we can say, yes, amen, go get them. But are we willing to sacrifice to see that greater good happen? And for any group of people, for that to happen. And oftentimes the answer can be no, not always, thankfully. But that will be hard, I think, for a lot of people who are saying amen and cheering you guys on, to cancel Netflix, to cancel whatever streaming. That will take it to a whole nother level. But I think you're right. As it dries up,
people might just leave the services anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned Adina, before we went live, the woman who starting a letter writing campaign.
Yes, we can talk about that.
Could you remind all of us how that happened and what she did?
Yeah, so our listeners, especially ones who are fans of the franchise, might either remember because they participated or have heard about Bijou Trimble and the letter writing campaign that she had started back in after season 1 of our beloved show.
It was season 1?
Yeah, I
thought it was season 2.
No, it was
season 2.
It was season 2. After season 2, and there was concern of there was not going to be a third season.
Yeah. So there was a letter writing campaign that
you may have gathered. Steve is the one who was alive during that.
Did you write a letter?
I was not.
I was in the room where it happened. I'm like Hamilton. Okay. I was in the room.
Well, now, because what happened I'm going to say this last week is when we heard about United We Trek, and several of us who are not in the LA area and can't practically get there for the day. Well, I was like, well, what do we do? Because we want to help. We feel very deeply and we would love to be there. But, again, living on the other side of the country, it's really not practical. So we started a new letter writing campaign channeling Bijou Trimble. And because, again, so Star Trek fans must be good at writing letters. And I think the idea of, baskets of mail showing up, probably not right on the CEO's desk, but on the admin's desk, which might even make it be more impactful. Because if you have an upset admin that starts asking questions like, why am I getting all the mail? So we started this campaign, and we'll have links. And we're going to have links to everything. We'll have links to details about United We Trek for those of you who can be in LA on the 8th or in New York, now that we know that there's something happening in New York, to send a letter. And the idea is to do it also this week, see if we can get a big pile of mail for that blank day. Which is weird to say too.
And so on an ongoing basis, I mean, honestly, the more we were leaning into this, the more it's striking me that our leveraging relationships with fans so that the fans can continue to speak out in whatever ways, be it social media, be it phone calls, be it letters, be it speaking to their neighbors, be it spreading the word, and being able to speak really intelligently about the issues so that they go from these actors to, hey, what's really at issue here? I think that's kind of what we want to try to achieve too, is a consciousness raising.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, I think we're showing, or want to be shown on September the 8th, is the solidarity that the fans have with the actors and the writers. And also, again, as I mentioned before, all the people that make it happen, that we're all together. And even though I'm on the West Coast, I've got my 2 letters here. Love it. As Adina requested.
My husband
and asked.
even wrote a letter. My husband even wrote a letter. I've got mine. I have to print them out. We're going in the mail tomorrow or Saturday. Yeah. And several people, we've been posting this around Facebook, and we've gotten several people say, yep, I've got a letter in. So we're trying to get more of that. And the details are all at trekfan2023.com/letter. We'll also again have all these links,
Mhm.
but that's something it doesn't take much to do in those instructions. In addition to addresses, I even have some guidance on, because we got some feedback like, what do I say? I don't know what to write in a letter. So there's some guidance.
Mhm.
We deliberately didn't do a form letter because at least from the original letter writing campaign, that was seen as a bad thing. You don't want just form letters because then people can copy paste. So it's got to be in your own words, but we provide some guidance to help you kind of say what you want to say. And I tell you, if my husband, who supports me as a Trek fan, isn't one himself, if he can write a letter, anyone can write a letter.
What would be, would be beautiful, Adina, and you all would be beautiful. Let's recreate that scene at the end of Miracle on 34th
That's
Street.
exactly
where
what I
they
have in
just
my
bring
head.
in bags of mail,
I
going,
wish.
"This is
I
Santa
wish.
Claus. This is Santa Claus." Well, we want to say, "This is what we want. We want you to." Yeah, and I mean, my letters. I'm just saying, Ken, just go to the table and discuss this with the writers, with the actors. Just sit down and go over and discuss. There's got to be a mutual understanding. There's got to be a common ground that they can reach. Otherwise, everyone suffers.
Yeah.
One of the things
And they're
we're
going to
really
suffer too in the long run.
we're really just saying, hey, we don't know what the numbers are. We don't know how you are running this model. You won't show us your books. We don't know how much you're paying to run Suits. We don't know how much the studio that made it is making from selling it to you. You're getting a lot of eyeballs. So we can't even trust if we get 5 cents, what's the formula you're using? And that's really, at the heart of this, there's a level of partnership. It's really hard to turn to people who think of you as their boss and say, we want you to think of us as your partner. And I think that's one of the things why we're in a bit of the pickle we're in a country in which this class division has led us to a point where labor says, thank you, sir. And the boss says, here's another nickel for you. And that's a structural change in every industry that starts from having a frank and honest dialogue about partnership.
Yeah. Listening. There has to be listening happening. And that's what you guys are asking. You're asking for them to listen to you, and you want to listen to them about what the numbers are and what behind what it all is.
In our country, after the Second World War, there was a guy named Walter Reuther who was the head of the UAW. And the very nature of the relationship between industry and labor was fundamentally different. The people who ran businesses made 6 or 7 times what the person who worked on the factory floor did. Now they make 500 times what the person on the factory floor does. And that gulf has become so insuperable that there's no conversation as equals. And that's what we're fighting for.
We're trying to get from the Pacific to the Atlantic when they're making it literally from the Pacific to Mars. Like, we want to talk.
Wow.
So is there any signs of them listening? Are they, how are they responding to everything? Like, what have they said officially?
Well, right now, literally since July 12th, we have not been back at the table with them. We have our internal communication within our negotiating committee. Right now, they've been back and forth finally with the WGA. I'm not in those negotiations because I'm not part of the WGA. But again, there's a lot of things that they still haven't given to them that are very necessary to protect that community.
But this is one thing that I do think has changed and I think is valuable, and is why I think it's important that this happened. I think when this started, given the nature of some of the language that was used on the part of the AMPTP folks, there was a sense that we're not necessarily going to be perceived as the black hats. It's unreasonable of labor. It's childish. I think what's happening is there's awareness, and a growing awareness that, whoops, they were wrong. They are being perceived as the black hats. Our posture is reasonable, and people are understanding the nature of the fight more and more and more. And that's what I think we can do to push this forward faster.
And we did tell them that they at the day one on the table in the room, we said, do not underestimate our resolve. And we stuck by it. We are very serious about protecting our members
and our capacity to message,
mm-hmm.
which is why we're here. It's 160,000 of us and 12,000 or so writers, all of us who are trying to figure out ways as best we can to put a message out in the world that says what we're asking for is human. It's human scale stuff. We are not big stars. We're simply trying to make a living in a tough profession. Listen to us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's resonated. The polls that I've read suggest that there's about 7% support of the AMPTP position relative to a considerably larger number of people who are saying, I get where you guys are coming from.
Yeah. Good. Nice.
Natalia, do you think if they come to some conclusion with the writers, that will help to spill over to the actors? Because I understand, we've got to, the scripts have got to be written before the actors can go to work. But if something can be worked out with the writers, would that help your position in negotiating with the producers?
It might. It's the reason why I say it might is because the AMPTP tries to play the same playbook, right? They use the same playbook, which is if they agreed to, for example, they've already made a deal with the DGA. This is where they were trying to get what they got and wins in the DGA to move it over to the writers and also to move it over to SAG-AFTRA. But that may not work for us. We all have similar things, but we're also, each area is very nuanced in the way each union deals with their members, right? So what might work for the DGA may not work for us. So
Okay.
may that still... Sure, it will, but that doesn't mean we may say yes to that, and we will still continue to fight for what's best for our members.
For instance, the DGA doesn't have the same vested interest in a residual structure because many DGA members, the majority of DGA members, are second directors, not directors, and they don't participate in residuals. So residuals, they want to say, hey, we made a deal with the Directors Guild on residuals. It's like, yeah, because the Directors Guild doesn't have the same dog in the fight. Mm-hmm. One of the writers' big issue is preserving the integrity of the writers' room to make sure that there is at least a guarantee that AI doesn't replace writers outright. Yeah. They may make some concessions, maybe more concessions than we right now anticipate with the writers on that front, but kind of lowball them on the residual front. And consequently, for us, we have to say, that's not germane to our concern.
And if they come to a conclusion with the writers and the writers go back to writing scripts, there's going to be a lot of paper just sitting around doing nothing until some actor, any one of you three, picks up that script and starts to do something with it. And including the directors, they can't even start production planning because they'll be just have a room full of sets with nothing to work with.
Yeah. And there's a lot of unity within our sister unions as far as even if they make deals, right? Like what may happen after that, we don't know yet. Maybe it's when everybody makes a deal, that's when things start moving again. We will see. But that's all part of the negotiation process.
Okay.
So I'm also curious, are they not seeing are they not feeling the impact from the box office? Because I know DC released a new movie, and because actors aren't doing press tours, there's not a lot of buzz for movies. So now movies are like not for except for like Barbie and Oppenheimer, who came out before this happened, before it started.
This was happening, yeah.
Pardon?
Like yeah.
Or they were still, they were still able to do the press tours.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
I feel like there was a lot of buzz around them. Whereas I feel like now newer movies, there's not a lot of buzz. They're taking at the box office. Are the executives not feeling that or noticing the connection?
Well, I think they're not, but this is what I would say. We are not saying don't go to the movies. Please support the movies, right?
Right, for sure.
We really want everybody to go because what they're going to turn around and say, right, these theaters are not necessarily AMPTP owned theaters. Mm-hmm. Let's just say that. So that would be removing another big player in the industry that has nothing to do with these studios that are going to be hurting. So please go support your theaters.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying, I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm saying, so for the audience, right, we want that to happen. And as far as that, what they're going to try to do is when these numbers in the box office come back, what they're going to try to do is see that didn't work. So, for example, I'm Latina, right? And the one that you just talked about, Christian, is a Latino-based
Right, exactly. The
This is
first
our
one.
first one ever. And this is where I would want everybody to go and support that, because what has been happening for our community as Latinos is they keep canceling our shows, keep canceling because they say it's not working. And what I think is important messaging in here is let's show them that all of this is important. And it brings it back to what our day is really about. It's United We Trek. It isn't only just about, it is about this franchise that we cannot name, but I think it's about the American scene in all, and it really this world that Gene has created to include everyone, diverse and right, like throughout the world and the universes. And I think that is the message. Are they feeling it right now? I don't know if they are.
Oh, okay.
That's going to move the needle. But for our members, go.
It's also complicated by the fact that within AMPTP, we're talking about a diverse number of businesses with very different business models. Amazon and Disney, as for instance, the entertainment business is one portfolio in a package of portfolios. They're going to measure numbers in a radically different way than Netflix is going to measure numbers. And there's a lot of internal conflict and internal dialogue, I'm sure, going on. They have to figure out a negotiating strategy that they can all agree on. And some of it is I suspect what is hard is that there's a lot of recognition that the structure that has been created is problematic in certain respects, but everybody has a very different perspective on the urgency of fixing it, how to fix it, and who's going to have to give up what.
Well, and we're at a critical moment right now because network television, which has been suffering in the advent of streaming and the kinds of shows streaming can do that network can't, they've lost their fall season. They're about a month away from losing a mid-season, which would mean that network television, if they don't resolve this in a month, it'll take writers about at least 3 months to write the beginning of a series. They would be looking at not having any fresh television until the following fall. So if you're someone who watches network television and watches any of the shows on network television, your show might be gone for another year.
But look at the reality of network television. ABC is owned by Disney, and Disney also streams, and Disney has amusement parks, and Disney has a backlog of entertainment. So Disney sits down and looks at all the various income streams and tries to determine a negotiating strategy based on this complicated set of factors. And they have to find out whether or not their shareholders are actually beginning to say, hey, if people are still buying stock in Netflix, Netflix has sent a different message. If there's anything I would say out there, it's like, hey, if you're owning Netflix stock, you might want to write Netflix and say, as a stockholder, I don't like what you're doing.
That's a good point too.
If you own, a lot of people own stock in their portfolio if they have
through their mutual funds and their 401ks and stuff.
So I probably look and see you have entertainment companies in your mutual fund and consider whether or not they're making smart decisions, because that's your pension too.
That's a really good idea. Because again, I'm all about like, what can I from afar do? That's something I can do. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of urgency right now surrounding the ways in which particularly public pension funds are managed in a way that doesn't necessarily disinvest from oil companies, as for instance. A lot of what's happening is shareholder awareness, the idea that if you own stock, you're not aware of it, you're a small shareholder, you got to start speaking up. Do you want to own a portion of Exxon in your portfolio? Well, that might be the way to consider that this has to happen too. Do you want to own Netflix right now?
That's interesting. No, I had not. I've not considered that, and probably many of our listeners who have traditional 401ks and stuff have probably not considered that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, letter writing, but that's
but that's okay. Letter writing is not a difficult thing to do. It's I don't have to get on a plane. I don't have to spend more than a stamp.
We talk about letter writing, phone calling.
I was about to ask about phone calling. Like we jam up their message or their answering machines.
Yeah, it's interesting. And as one thing that's also true, if you're in politics, if you're calling your representative, your representative, I'm a Democrat, your representative may be a Democrat. My calling Adam Schiff doesn't really mean that much. And if I call a representative from another state, they're going to disregard me. That is not true of the entertainment industry. Every postcard matters. Every phone call matters. So, any outreach actually has an impact.
Well, postcards are still used politically. People still do handwritten postcards to swing states for a reason. People like getting someone's letter.
Yep.
That's fair. Well, everyone, this has been amazingly educational for one. I'm really happy that you guys are all able to be here. I want to make sure that we remind everybody. So there's United Retrek on Saturday the 8th. And I'm sorry, Friday the 8th. I'm sorry, Friday the 8th on that blah, blah, blah day, blank, blank day. Okay. We'll have all the details in the show notes. And then there's the corresponding one on the same day out in New York, which that's new as of now. So by Friday, hopefully everyone will hear about that. We have our letter writing. And then the one thing we also didn't mention is there are opportunities for people to make donations.
Yeah.
There is an emergency fund, and we'll put the link there too. And this is to help people who are really struggling through this time. So any of us who can make a donation, I did actually about a month ago, but I'll probably do it again because we can. And so these are all the things that we can do. And apparently now I can go check out my 401k and see if there's more I can do there too. So there's a whole bunch of things that us as fans can do, which is great. Do any of you have any final last words to say about this before we close out for the night?
I'm just a great believer in being vocal. I think the squeaky wheel. So if to everybody, I would say the more you're interested in educating yourself, not just about what's happening in this particular labor action, but generally speaking, across the country, when we were rich, really rich as a country, we had almost 90% of the workforce was labor. We are now looking at a country where 1 in 4 or 5 people, depending on what statistic you look at, is food insecure in certain parts of our country. When the standard of living for most people, it's perceived as they haven't basically seen uptick, they've seen downswing over the last 30 years. Labor, I don't know, you probably know, Natalia, the percentage of the American population that is in a labor union, it's high teens, low 20s.
Yeah, really, really low.
Is that it? Wow.
I want to say it's like 15 or 7 or something really low.
Once upon a time, we had defined benefit pensions. Once upon a time, we had health insurance through our workforce, through our job. Those historical conditions have changed. Some of it had to do, granted, with globalism, but a lot of it had to do with political decisions that have been made. And I guess if there's anything I would say is we all need to actually take responsibility for the fact that we have let this great divide bring a lot of people in our country down into something akin to the gutter financially. And we have an obligation mutually to each other to start speaking about it.
Yeah. All I want to say is just first, even though the fan base that is on this podcast isn't part of my fan base, right? Because I'm not part of the franchise, but thank you to everybody, because I think it's so important. The fans make all of our jobs, all of our work so meaningful at the end of the day and possible. And without you, our shows don't thrive as much as they do. And this franchise wouldn't be around for so long if it weren't for you. So thank you for that. Thank you for wanting to be informed and understand that this fight is not just ours. It's everybody in the United States. It is hurting us all. And I think if we personalize it in that way, that's where we can make a difference. One ripple is what makes the pond really beautiful. So let's stick together, united.
Excellent.
I'll add one last thing, that I think it's fitting that the first union strike for our cause to include fans would be this franchise, because we are the baddest ass fans of any show I've ever experienced.
Sure. That is right.
And, it's fitting. It should be this fan group to turn out to support us. So I'm very excited.
Excellent.
And can I just say, we're grateful for you folks for inviting us into this, and for all the pictures you're posting. Sometimes daily helps us feel like we're a part and like we're staying up to date. And it just shows how much you value us. And that means a lot to the fans. And Natalia, as for the four of us, we're now your fan base, just so you know. So we'll be following you even closer.
Thank you.
Also, can I just say, everyone go see a movie, and please, go check out that DC movie we're talking about. It's a big deal.
I can't say it, but you can.
Natalia, are you in that?
Well, I did some voice stuff.
It was good. It was really good.
Yeah, I've been hearing like really good things
You
about it.
saw
I'm like,
it already,
I need to get there.
Wow.
Is it, maybe that the web of your ability will get out there,
Well, that too.
You've got kids and everything, and you already saw
Well,
it?
yes, I brought
How?
brought my wait, did we bring
You
my
could say the name of the film. We can't, but you can.
Okay, we're talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It's awesome.
No, you was talking about someone.
I was talking about.
I was talking about
I knew
Spider-Man.
you hadn't seen it.
That's right. Yeah.
Wait, so what movie? What movie are you guys talking about?
I'm talking about Blue Beetle.
Blue Beetle.
That just came out.
Oh,
The
no,
Spider-Verse
yes,
was amazing too. Like that was
Yes.
really cool.
That was definitely in violation of SAG rules. Now we're out of
both of them, so they're both my family.
That's my new favorite Adina moment right there.
What are we? Okay, I'm behind. Okay, everybody.
That's okay.
Okay, so with my little embarrassing moment, we're going to wrap up this special edition of the Big Sci-Fi podcast. So we hope everyone's going to get out there on September 8th who can. We hope you're going to spread the word, and we hope you're going to write some letters. So now
And
remember,
jam the phone lines.
yes, just as the crew of our favorite ship stand together, stronger together, so do the talented actors, writers, and other professionals who make the shows we love and enjoy. They make so many amazing worlds come to life. If you've been inspired and take part in these events, please let us know by visiting our social media channels and telling us. We would love to hear about it. And don't forget, we are a proud part of the Trek Geeks podcast network, and all of us in the Trek Geeks network are strong supporters of the actors, writers, and want to see everyone participate in these events. Until we meet again, let's keep the essence and vision of what Gene Roddenberry created all those years ago alive. An aspiration for a better universe for everybody. Live long and prosper, and stand united, and we'll talk to you next week.